Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. This is the Tuesday, February 25th edition of the Daily Pulse. Let you in on a little secret. I'm recording it on Monday around midday, but very important interview. So we want to hold it for you for Tuesday so you can catch it in its entirety. And we're excited, pleased to welcome to the WellPoint Studios none other than our 3rd District Congresswoman representing Lowell and the surrounding communities, Congresswoman Lori Trahan. How are you, Congresswoman?
I'm
Good
great,
to have you back. Happy New Year. I haven't seen you forever.
This is absolutely the latest we would wish each other Happy New Year, but only because we haven't seen each other.
Yeah, it's not. What's the cutoff? January 10th?
I don't know. Larry David said it's like January 15th, I think.
Okay, that sounds like a good deal. Well, I'm glad to have you here. You're literally going to leave our studios and head to the airport to get back to Washington, D.C. A lot going on there, and we want to talk about all of it because it's been a while since we've chatted. Let me just quickly thank our sponsors of the Daily Pulse. Of course, Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, Real Estate Ray Booten is your man. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint for hosting us here in the WellPoint Studios. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. I'm going to quickly thank our sponsors. I apologize to all of you, but I got an important discussion to have here, and she's got a plane to catch. So I'm going to quickly run them down. I'll give you more love on future Daily Pulses, but thank you to the Washington Savings Bank, TMI Properties, Mahoney Oil, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, Francis E. Preventure Insurance, and of course, the Massachusetts Pirates. I'll make it up to you, I promise. But you're an important person, Congresswoman.
Oh, thank you for all that.
We're glad to have you here. So you got to go back to D.C., but you're going to be communicating with the district tomorrow evening, right?
Yeah.
You have a telephone town hall.
Yes, tomorrow night at 5:30. I think one of the most important things in representative government, certainly in the role that I play, is to not only just get around the district, but also to host town halls. They're great community forums. We had our first in-person one of the year a couple of weeks ago in 𝗪𝗏𝗃, but certainly the telephone town hall allows us to reach many more people. So we're fully expecting a few thousand people to dial in. And then, so if anybody wants to dial in, they can go to any one of our social media handles on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram, and just sign up.
So what, you get a couple of thousand people who will participate?
Yeah,
in
so
this?
I will tell you, these teletown halls have been record-breaking. And I think for one, because so much has happened in a very short time since this administration has taken office. So people really want to understand, A, what's happening, how is that going to impact them, and then what are Democrats doing? But yeah, we've heard, I haven't had a 15,000 person town hall, but many of my colleagues have. So we're preparing for a pretty high turnout tomorrow.
Who handle the logistics, the phone lines, and are people allowed to ask questions if they pre-send them?
Absolutely.
Or how does it work?
We did a lot of these during COVID, which was another time when people were just craving information. And yes, there's a bunch of ways to submit questions. People will text them in, they'll email them beforehand, and then we kind of go through the queue and people will get to ask their questions. So it's
so 5:30 tomorrow night?
5:30
All right, I may crash it just to listen. I'll get my questions out of my system today, but I'm just curious logistically how this gets pulled off.
Yeah, there's a group that actually handles, especially with that many people. So yeah, we've got, they'll mute and unmute the phone lines as people kind of make their way through the queue. But it's a great way to ask questions. And look, I think the one thing I've always sort of really committed myself to is that I represent everybody in my district, not just the people who voted for me. I want to make sure I hear what's on their mind, the things that maybe they like in terms of the moves that the administration's making. And then certainly, it's just a good opportunity to just hear sort of the concerns and the anxieties that people have.
And there are a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people cheering. There are a lot of people very concerned. Last week, you were with the Merrimack Valley Food Bank and concern there that perhaps the money supply of food may get cut out. And we all know, anybody here knows the work that the Merrimack Valley Food Bank does. If you follow Inside Lowell, the Lowell Sun, the radio station, we all get it. So do we know for sure? Do we have definitive answers? Has anything already been cut off? Is it about to be cut off? What do we know about the food bank in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question, because certainly when a couple weeks ago when we had the funding freeze, that was like a 5-alarm fire in our district. And we got thousands of phone calls, not just from the Merrimack Valley Food Bank, but from Lowell Community Health Center, from CTI, from Head Start, all these programs, because they weren't able to access some of the portals that they use to, pay their employees, which has a trickle-down effect to patients and vulnerable families and the folks that they all serve. So that was a huge wake-up call. Obviously, we got an injunction in court to end that freeze. The White House had since rescinded the memo to freeze that money. But we're heading into budget season, and we are, sort of looking at the framework that they are trying to pass through their own conference, and $230 billion in cuts to food assistance programs would be a direct hit on the Merrimack Valley Food Bank, along with so many other organizations, SNAP, things that you're familiar with. So, they're rightly concerned about cuts that drastic and across the board, because it will hurt, like I said, all food banks, and not just the food banks, but you forget all the programs that they run, right? Like these mobile markets, they go to the Lowell Housing Authority, and not just Lowell, and all of our surrounding communities. And so the ripple effect is really what they do for Middlesex community colleges and Lowell public schools. So it would be a devastating cut.
I know they help feed some of the recovery homes over at Megan's house. They work with us. Oh, and by the way, might as well throw this in there. I understand you're going to be the honoree this year at the 10th anniversary Megan House Gala.
Yes, which I'm thrilled about. I mean, I obviously have gotten to know Megan's House, and thank you for all the work that you do. But, really, it's an honor, from someone who was campaigning and getting to know the organization and all the lives that they've touched, to them being, honored on their 10th anniversary. It's really cool.
So we know you'll be back here at the end of September. So I'm going to lock you in on a date coming in here. But so to the best of our knowledge right now, no funding has been disrupted to the food bank that we know of.
No, because of the court case, their funding is still happening. Now, I will tell you that there have been glitches, as you can imagine, when you do something as drastic as just funding, a freeze or a halt on all of that funding. It takes a while for those signals to come back on. So we have heard, not from the Merrimack Valley Food Bank, from some of our other partners, that they're not getting the funding. And so I think right now we're shifting our focus, and one of the reasons why we're heading back down to DC is because the budget reconciliation tool that Republicans hope to use to pass many of these cuts are, the funding freeze was just a preview of that, where they're really going to target. And so I think the one big one, and the one we highlighted at last week's roundtable, was the food services and the agricultural USDA programs that are funded. But the much bigger one, and the one that is on my committee, is the nearly $1 trillion that are being targeted in Medicaid. And I think that one has everybody rightfully concerned, because Massachusetts, our hospital infrastructure is already so fragile with Steward gutting so many of our community hospitals. Any change to our Medicaid payment, the federal share of that, will be devastating for so many hospitals that are already on the brink. I mean, we have a hospital in Neshoba Valley that is yet to reopen. And the folks in those communities like Ayer, Groton, and Dunstable are, nervous about whether they're going to have an emergency room again in their community. So this is the exact wrong time to be taking money out of Medicaid. But it's not just the payment that pays for our most vulnerable to access health care. I mean, so many of our seniors and our, grandparents or our parents who are in long-term facilities, that gets paid for with Medicaid. So it's really a hit on both the middle and the working class families.
So is there an indication that that is what the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress are going to do? Or are they going to try to target, as they are claiming, money that in those programs that then ends up supporting services for the migrants who are in Lowell and other areas of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing that's what they're trying to target. Whether they can laser focus it that sharply without hitting something else remains to be seen. But what are you understanding?
So there's no way to get to $880 billion, which is the number that our committee's been given without Medicaid. There is that is like a big bucket of cost. And so that number just calls for that's a dramatic change in how Medicaid is delivered today. You don't actually get to anywhere close to that by saying we're not going to pay, for migrants or undocumented. I mean, that's just, it would literally result in, not just in Massachusetts. I mean, Massachusetts only gets 50%. And so when we talk about Medicaid in Massachusetts, that's Mass Health. So many, 1 million people in Massachusetts are reliant on Mass Health. That will change even if it goes down by a percentage point. But what's more interesting about this cut, and I'm eager to hear my Republican colleagues talk about this in committee when we go through it, is that it's a much bigger share for red states, right? For Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma. Those states not only get a bigger share from the federal government, but they also have trigger laws. So if there's any change to that payment from the feds, they stop their Medicaid expansion. Now, one of the coolest things that's happened since I've been in Congress is we've been able to insure 22 million additional people through the Affordable Care Act. Most of that has been through Medicaid expansion. Cutting that is just going to roll back people's access to health care. And so we'll see, we'll see what their answer for that is or how they sort of justify that. But it is, there's no way to get to that big of a number in our committee in healthcare without transforming Medicaid.
All right. We'll see where that debate plays out. The other thing, the Rourke Bridge, immediately after that funding freeze, you talked about the Rourke Bridge. Lowell has $180 million targeted, earmarked from DC for that, but also another 21-something million for those Tiger grant bridges.
Yes.
So what do we know about that? That money was already committed. So is that in danger or future funding in danger?
I think the one thing that we have learned just in the 5 short weeks that we've been in this session of Congress is that we don't know. Everything is in limbo. And I think the point that you made earlier, look, we can all get behind targeted cuts, right? There's no question that it's incredibly popular with the U.S. Public to, trim waste and fraud where it exists from our foreign aid programs, from our domestic programs. I mean, no one wants that. I mean, but the cudgel that they have brought, first with the funding freeze and now with the size of these cuts, is just, it's going to be devastating, right? And so I will say that, when you look at budgets, there's a cost-cutting side, of course, and we absolutely should tighten our belt and root out waste wherever it exists. There's also a revenue side. And right now what's being proposed is nearly $4.5 trillion in tax cuts over a 10-year period, which that kind of throws everything out of balance. They can't come up with $4 trillion in cuts over the same time horizon. And so I think that's where the rub is, right? You can't have a tax cut for the wealthiest in our country. You can't extend these 2017 tax cuts responsibly and then add on to them more benefits for, the wealthiest corporations while doing that on the backs of people who rely on healthcare or food programs. And so that's the problem here. And I think that's going to be laid bare to the American people in these next couple of weeks as we go through these budget negotiations.
You've shown a willingness that there's a number of bills, everyone focuses on the differences, right, between Democrats and Republicans. But you put forth a number of bills throughout the year, every year that you've been there with Republican colleagues that don't get the attention because those are boring. So you've shown a willingness to work across the aisle.
Yeah.
So there's a guy that's pretty close to the President of the United States who's from Lowell, Massachusetts. Do you ever speak to Corey Lewandowski? Do you ever talk about Lowell issues and explain to him, like, hey, can you talk to the big guy? Maybe he won't listen to you, but he might listen to Corey about the importance of the Rourke Bridge and some of the other bridges. Have you made such outreach?
So it's a good question. One, I don't know how impactful Corey is in this administration. He doesn't have a role formally in the administration. Definitely there's the first woman chief of staff ever is in the White House, Susie Wiles, and Corey wasn't really part of the campaign in an official role. Look, I would move mountains to unlock this funding for Rourke Bridge, and if Corey was someone who I thought could be influential in that, he'd be on my call list in a second. Right now, I think we're trying to sort of ferret out if the bipartisan infrastructure law is going to be gutted, if those funds that were authorized are going to be part of these drastic cuts, or if those are going to be, Trump used to talk about infrastructure week all the time, right? So there are some of those. So we're sort of waiting to see like what programs, what parts of that bill, because it was a bipartisan bill, are going to be represented in this budget. And then I think from there we'll have a better sense of how to proceed. But, look, you're right. I do pride myself on my Republican relationships on energy and commerce, but also in the broader Congress. I've worked with a lot of folks on substance use disorder, on mental health issues, on children's child care, pediatric cancer treatment for kids. So, and those relationships bleed out into bigger, conversations. So I'm going to use whatever tool I have to make sure that Massachusetts Third continues with the investments that we've had these last few years.
And just last week, the president issued, I think, an executive order about IVF treatments, which I know was a big part of your agenda the last term and going back a couple of terms. So that perhaps there's a willingness to find middle ground there.
Look, I would like to hold the president to his word where he said he's going to make it even more affordable and even covered by insurance and not. I would love to see that go one step further. Right now it's hard to make sense of what that executive order is going to mean for IVF going forward when he has fissures in his own party around IVF, right? There are still too many Republicans who are on the Right to Life Act, or the Life at Conception Act, that would put IVF in harm's way. So, some of these things are how, words on paper versus statute, right? I mean, there is a limit to these executive actions. I hope that that's a place where we can come together to safeguard that miraculous treatment for so many families in statute.
All right, we're chatting with Congresswoman Lori Trahan. It's the InsideLowell Daily Pulse. It is, we're recording it on Monday the 24th, but we're airing it on the Tuesday 25th, February 25th edition of the Daily Pulse. I want to wrap up before you have to go talking about right after the November election, you sent out a statement. Yeah. I'm titling it, and you kind of titled it, Hard Truths.
Yeah.
I'm going to read what you wrote. Quote, "There's no question that we have a lot to learn from this outcome." You're talking about Democrats, the Democratic Party, on policy, on messaging, and above all else, on rebuilding trust with the people we fight for every day. It's in these moments where a team either comes together with determination to learn from a setback or it risks splintering under pressure. We must seize this opportunity to stare down hard truths, develop new muscles, and commit to the difficult work of emerging stronger. Sounds like you're saying the Democratic Party lost touch with middle America. Is that what you were saying?
When I wrote Hard Truths, what I meant was that there's no rebuilding the Democratic Party until you actually recognize the scale of the failure, right? I mean, there were many people who they needed Democrats to perform as they were looking down at, President Trump coming back into office after, literally denying election results and, fomenting, January 6th and the events, and we failed them, right? So I think it's really important that we say that if we're going to get on the path to rebuilding trust. And the reality is, I don't think Democrats in the last election took on tough issues, uncomfortable issues head on, whether that was border security, trans athletes. We did not, I think we thought many of the investments and the positive things that we did, whether it's infrastructure or chips and science, that those would speak for themselves. They clearly didn't. And then the other one was acknowledging the pain that people were in. The cost of living was rising. We were looking at macroeconomic signals that said better days are ahead, but people don't want to hear about GDP and unemployment rates when they're hurting. They want solutions. And so I do think Democrats got that message loud and clear. There's no question that we are building, new muscles and making sure that we're doing sort of the hard work to meet people where they are, right? To talk about not just our sort of our defensive policies against this administration, but also talking about what we would be doing differently, how we would make childcare more affordable, housing more affordable, put policies in place, which, by the way, this administration hasn't done anything. House Republicans haven't proposed a single bill to lower the price of eggs or housing. I mean, that is what this election was about, and yet we haven't done anything to do it. So I think Democrats have an opportunity to reclaim how committed we are for people getting ahead, making sure that, we grow the middle class and we give folks a path there.
Based on what you've heard over the last month since the inauguration and the couple of months before the election, are you concerned that the party didn't get the message? And there's been a bunch of recent polling that has shown Donald Trump more popular than Democratic ideas on policies. Scott Jennings on CNN says the Democrats always end up on the wrong side of the 80-20 issues. They always pick the 20. But there was a poll last week about Congress. And I believe it was Quinnipiac, but I'm not sure. But it talked about the approve or disapprove. And then it asked, do you approve of Republicans in Congress? 40% approve, 52% disapprove. For Democrats, it was 21% approve, 68% disapprove. Those were the overall numbers. Independents, though, 40 to 53 approve, disapprove of Republicans, which was about where the entire poll was.
Yeah.
Among the independents, Democrats are 19 approve, 70 disapprove, even worse than the overall poll.
Yeah.
That party's lost the middle of America. It has to get it back or else it can't survive.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I take very seriously the rebuilding trust. I mean, look, we have to speak with authenticity. I think Democrats also fell into this trap of using poll-generated, consultant driven language to try to win this election cycle, and it hurt us mightily. People want to know that we're going to protect them, we're going to fight like hell for them, and that we're also going to sort of come and try to find common ground when we can. And I think that even in the last Congress, it's amazing how it's so hard to penetrate people's daily lives, right? People are getting their news in such a fractured environment right now. No one really knows or understands that, the reason why we were able to avert a government shutdown or the debt crisis last time was because Democrats did go. The reason why Mike Johnson was able to stay as speaker was because Democrats kind of came and did the right thing. That message didn't get out. I think a lot of folks look at the Democrats as being too far left and not willing to do that. I said, so I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to do both. We have to show that we are, common sense, especially when we need to be, but we're also going to stand our ground. I mean, when the Trump administration is in there, this Doge unit, I don't even know what to call it because it's not a, it's not a sort of a program or an office that has been, sort of put up in statute. Doesn't matter. When they are giving the keys to, not just an unelected, because most people who work in our federal government aren't elected, but they are vetted in some way. They do go through a process. They do have the confidence that if we give people the keys to their private, most, sensitive information, that it's going to be checked. It's going to be verified. It's going to be, there's going to be checks and balances on that. Right now, that's not happening. I think people are worried. People are worried about what that means for their livelihood, what that means for their privacy. day. And so I think that's a place where Democrats, we really need to hold the line. We need to say, like, that is unacceptable. That's not how these agencies were built, and it doesn't give anybody a good feeling, which is why you've seen so much litigation in court. And I think this upholding of these 3 very important articles in our Constitution around checks and balances and separation of powers is an important one. Now, is that going to break through to people I'm shopping at Market Basket with every day? No, right? They want to know that their grocery bill when they go to checkout isn't going to have to, make them not pay one of their utility bills because they're putting food on the table. And so I do think that Democrats have to get back to their bread and butter. We've always been the party of, the working class, unions, aspiring to a middle class. That's what my whole family was, that's how I grew up. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. And so I do think that going back to those core those pocketbook issues are really important while we're doing the hard work of, making sure corruption doesn't seep back into our government, making sure that it's as transparent as people expect it to be, and that we're protecting these democratic institutions. Not the institution of Congress necessarily. It's incredibly unpopular. Disruption is always good, but you can't just wipe out huge swaths of our federal civilian force who have dedicated their lives to making sure we have clean water or that you get your Social Security check at time. So there is we all have to kind of get to sort of a common sense place, Republicans included right now, because I think they've gone too far in sort of their approach to disrupting, our institutions and our federal government.
All right, we're going to end it right there. I don't want Maria to get mad at me out there. I've learned never to tick off a Greek woman.
No,
you've got a plane to catch. So, Congressman Trahan, as always, thank you for the time. We'll get you back in a few more months. And again, congratulations on the honor from the Megan House Foundation.
Thanks so much, Teddy.
Thank you to Congresswoman Trahan. Thank you for joining us as well here on the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse on this Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Tomorrow, we'll talk to Lowell City Councilor 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗪. Till then, everybody stay safe and stay warm.